All right, what is up, my homies, and welcome today to Gray Gaming. Today, on another episode of Settlement Builds for Noobs, we are going to be taking a look at the Coastal Cottage. The Coastal Cottage is a northern settlement located on the Atlantic coastline in the game, and this is a rather challenging build site to look at. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of what this settlement is, I did want to go ahead and give a commenter shout-out. Today's video is brought to you by a suggestion from BACD1990. Taking a look at the site on the map, we are located right here. So there isn't a whole lot nearby. We aren't too far from the Slog if we hop across the water, and we are just a short jaunt from the Kingsport Lighthouse. The site itself has a lot of challenge going for it. The first thing is it has a lot of elevation change. So if we go ahead and start looking, you can see that a lot of the settlement is on this very steep sloping hillside, so it's not very easy to build around. There's a lot of rocks and a lot of rock cliff faces, and then there is the collapsed house. Now, strangely enough, there's this giant sinkhole, and I think that the in-universe explanation for this sinkhole is this is supposed to be a Yaoguai den. And I think that the reason for that is that on the far side of the settlement, just beyond your build range, you see a bunch of dead Yaoguai bodies, and around the corner there is a Deathclaw that spawns in the middle of all the Yaoguai bodies. So I think that the explanation is that this is a Yaoguai den, and a Deathclaw wandered in, wiped out the Yaoguai, and then that kind of cleared the area for raiders to move in. But there's other challenges besides just the sinkhole to build around. You also have the unscrappable house, where there's not really enough of the house left to work with, and a lot of this other garbage, like this couch and this stand of trees, can't be scrapped either. So even though this is a very small and uneven build area, your situation is that much worse because you can't actually clear the vast majority of garbage that is at this site. It's also true here of a lot of these shipping containers that are on the hillside. You can't get rid of these either. So this is a very challenging build site. I would put this in my top 5 difficult locations to construct at. And a lot of times I just utterly ignore this site. But I wanted to give this location my all so that I could actually publish something that's hopefully useful to you guys. So let's go ahead and take a look at my Coastal Cottage build. Alright, so for this settlement build, we ended up going with a modified platform build with a little bit of tower build integrated in. And this site, we pretty much use the maximum buildable area. There's not a whole lot left to work with. So we have 2 primary structures. We have this gun platform, and we also have this primary kind of living quarters. And so there's spawn points all over this site, so you really need to make sure that you have a lot of turrets set up in a lot of different directions. So you can kind of see here where anything that I've built is completely surrounded by turrets. But with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the outside of the settlement. So we do have this shop, which is completely barren and plain. I haven't built anything in here because it just has all this garbage laying around that you can't scrap. So it also has the roof torn out as well. So not all that useful and clean to work with. So I just left it. The same with the house. The house is largely collapsed, as I said earlier. So I largely ignored it. For the most part, outside of our 2 towers, we just have a trading post. So it looks like Doc Weathers is in for a visit. And we also have our Brahmin pen, which there aren't currently any Brahmin living at this tower. But I decided to just kind of integrate it into the walls of the new tower that we constructed and used the unscrappable porch as kind of a third wall. So there is a little bit of an air gap in here, but not large enough for a Brahmin to squeeze out of. So I figured it's probably safe to leave as is. So that's the Brahmin pen. And other than that, the house is unused. It's just kind of cordoned off by some of the scaffolding that I threw in here. And I did leave the entrance to the sinkhole open because for whatever reason, AI for your settlers makes them walk into it. I don't know why. I don't know what is so captivating about it. But if you try and close this off and try and put platforms over it, put concrete flooring through it. It doesn't prevent AI from, or prevent your NPCs from actually spawning inside it, and then they're just stuck inside a concrete floor. So I just left it open so that they could freely move in and out of it, other than this stupid Brahmin that is stuck. That's wonderful. Doc Weathers, work on your levitating cow. All right, stepping up into our tower, you can see once again that we have quite a bit of turrets built around. I don't quite have enough building materials for a pair of heavy laser turrets over the door, so this is kind of a build in progress still, but I figured it was complete enough that you could get an idea for what I've done here. I don't yet have this location connected to my supply lines, and I usually don't even bother just because it's such a minor out-of-the-way settlement that I usually don't even integrate it into my headcanon story of rebuilding the Commonwealth. But let's go ahead and step into our atrium. So we do have kind of this nice open concept. So I said that this was a combination of our platform build and our tower build. So we do have kind of that rectangular multi-storied structure of a tower build, but I also wanted this to be open daylight. So I integrated this open air atrium in the center of the tower. So you don't get as much buildable area as a tower build, but aesthetically speaking, it looks pretty darn cool, if I do say so myself. I'm not perfectly thrilled with the Vault-Tec railing because this is the only railing that I could use to completely wrap around the inside of this open air atrium. I wanted it to be cleaner than just the rusty steel guardrails. And this was the four-sided guardrail was the only one that I could implement here that would actually work. So I kind of don't like these dividers that are here. I would have liked for this to just be a completely open air in the middle, but it didn't turn out too bad if I do say so myself. All right, stepping into our first floor, we have our commissary and cafeteria area. So it's your usual fare for my restaurant and trading floor. So we do have a little more signage than we normally have, and we do have our diner booths here. So this looks very similar to what you probably saw at my Nuka World build site. And that's largely because it was based off of it. The dimensions are almost identical. I did trade up the market floor a little bit and threw all of the counters facing the same direction. So you just walk up to whatever tower you want and you approach whatever vendor you want to purchase from. So it's a little bit different layout just because there wasn't quite enough room to integrate it all, but overall it didn't turn out too bad. Across the hall, we have our clinic and barber area. So again, kind of your usual fare with my medical clinic. So we have the doctor, we have the barber with a nice waiting chair, and we do have a Phoropter. And here I threw in some Vault-Tec signs, everything fairly related to health and safety. So I kind of like how that turned out. It tends to go well with this site. And because I am going with a little more signage than usual, it looks more at home there. So I do have this lounge area, just a few couches and chairs, some potted plants. And down here, we have our reactor area. So I learned a neat new trick with the reactors today when I was building this. And if you use the grading flooring from the concrete build set, you can actually poke the reactor up through the floor. So rather than my usual tower build where I have to make sure that my bottom unfinished floor is a little taller than the actual height of a concrete wall, I can actually completely floor in my tower, and as long as I go with a concrete grading for the floor above it, I can poke or clip my fusion reactor's connectors through and connect up on the floor above. So that saved me kind of a lot of nastiness here because this particular spot in the settlement is very steep, and I was not a huge fan of it. The one downside is that when I completely encase the floor, I do not have the ability to place a water pump. So I kind of fixed that by putting garden plots in. So by adding garden plots, I can add water pumps to these sites. So you can actually plant water pumps in garden plots. As long as you're allowed to build the garden plots, you can put your water pumps in as well. So kind of the headcanon explanation is that these aren't just dirt piled on top of concrete floors. They're actually just kind of a bin that goes down to the ground and is dirt all the way down. All right, and so that is it for our main floor. Okay, so this is our residential deck. So all of the housing here is identical. So I won't go into every single one of these rooms, but every blue door is a personal quarters. And here, it's our same basic accommodations. We have a bed, and we have a locker. I went with a locker instead of our usual Vault 88 steam trunk, just because we are pretty close to the door. These are half the size of my normal single-person accommodations. So instead of 2 floor spaces deep, it's just 1 floor space. So rather than block off a piece of the door with a steamer trunk, I just threw in a Vault-Tec style locker instead. And so this entire floor is just housing. So you can fit about a dozen settlers in this build site. So before we move up to our next deck, I'll go ahead and just do a quick shoot over the sky bridge to our gun platform. So as is usually the case with our builds, I like elevated artillery platforms. So having this heavy concrete platform to build on gives us a commanding view of the surrounding countryside, at least when we don't have fog. I'll go ahead and fix that. So there you can see for quite a long distance in pretty much every direction. So the elevated artillery, they can spot smoke grenades very quickly and move into fire or provide supporting fire. Down here on the deck below, so this is more of our traditional tower build. We do have our workshop crammed in here, and there's a lot more room than what we need for our workshop, so we could actually cordon this off, build in some additional rooms if we wanted. But for right now, we just have our armor or weapons workbench, armor, chemistry station, and power armor. There's also expansion room in here. So the bottom floor of this is completely cordoned off or unused. So we can just add as we need. So if we accidentally left a radio recruitment beacon on for a bit too long, we could simply build additional housing down here. And you could also add to your headcanon story that the people who man the guns live in the tower rather than with the rest of the settlement, so that it's easy to make your shift changes and everyone just kind of hangs out here. And so that is it for this deck. Let's go ahead and move up. So this floor is more of what you're usually used to seeing. So I like this to be kind of social progress. So I threw in a couple showers, and rather than my usual communal shower, I wanted these to be more of a private affair. So you do have a changing room with a locker, and you do have your showers here. So instead of kind of your group showers, we get a little bit more privacy. And we really didn't lose that much build area by going with private showers over the communal ones anyway, so I think it turned out rather good. We also have 3 of our usual lavatories, which is just a toilet and a sink. Nothing fancy. All of the green doors are lavatories. And then over here, we have our happiness generating stuff. So we have our gym, which is just a couple pommel horses, a couple weight sets. And we have our arcade. So we have our usual arcade cabinets from the Creation Club. If you don't have these, then don't worry. You can use the Vault 88 slot machines to accomplish the exact same thing. I just like the arcade cabinets because it adds a little bit more variety to your arcade casino area. And we do have a Whack-A-Commie game from the Nuka World DLC. So there wasn't quite enough room to throw in the atomic roller balls as well. So I just went with one or the other. This one was the most compact, so I figured it would be the least pain in the ass to actually get around for anyone who wants to get to the slot machines and play a few rounds. All right, and so that is it for this deck. And then we move up to our final deck. So normally for my tower builds, I do an open air concept where it's just windowed walls all the way around so that no one can fall out. And that's it. For this site, though, I wanted this to be a greenhouse. So we are on the coast. There's going to be a lot of saltwater spray, and that's going to kill your gardens. So rather than dealing with that, where our garden can only grow crops that are very salt resistant, I decided going with a greenhouse prevents that salt spray, but still lets us grow on the rooftop. So we have our usual sky deck fare, but completely encased. The only downside is we don't get the benefit of rain at this location, so you would have to move all of your water up to the top floor. So here, we do have a pretty limited garden as far as quantity, but we do have a rather varied variety. So we've got some potatoes, we've got razor grain, we've got some corn, carrots, and mute fruit. We also have an additional garden plot for planting things like melons or gourds if we wanted. But for right now, this settlement only has 3 people living in it. So we can get away with only having this very limited garden space. As the settlement grows to over a dozen, we can throw in more types of food and more variety. I also have some additional seating. So I like to put some outdoor dining type tables in my sky decks, so you can actually just post up a chair and look out over the Commonwealth from the safety of a nice elevated position surrounded by turrets. So you can view and enjoy what scenery there is to view in the wasteland. And if you really wanted and aren't afraid of heights, you can look down and see all the way down to the bottom floor. And there you have it, folks. That is my Coastal Cottage build. So it's not quite what I wanted it to be, but this site does come with a fair number of challenges, as I said. It's probably the best settlement that I've ever constructed at this site, but normally, like I said, I just ignore this site completely because it is such a pain to work around. But all in all, it didn't turn out too bad. I would be pretty okay with living here if I lived in the Fallout universe. But let me know what you think. Do you have any suggestions for how to improve this site, given the amount of room we have to work with? Have you built anything similar to this? Or what do you normally like to do with the Coastal Cottage area? Please let us know what you think in the comments down below. Like and subscribe, especially if you want to have a notification every time we drop new content on this channel. And until next time, this is Gray Gaming, and I will see you all here next time. Stay safe.